and welcome to all of you for attending our very important talk tonight. It's another one of our monthly program meetings sponsored by Woods and Wetlands, the group of the Sierra Club. My name is Linda Tilton, and I will be your host this evening, although these programs happen with a lot of help from many people. These meetings are held on the second Sunday of every month on a variety of topics relating to our environment, stewardship, wildlife, nature, public policy, and anything that relates to outdoor activities like hiking and canoeing and kayaking. As our online meetings are free and open to the public, but they all require that you sign in and then join us on the second Sunday of every month. In a minute, we will hear from our featured speaker for June, Ted Glasso, an ambassador for the Alliance for the Great Lakes. But as Doug said, just a reminder, we are recording this and you will be able to watch it later or return to it for any reason. I will send you that link next week after we get it loaded onto our YouTube site, providing the hamsters are running fast and we could get all that on the site. No problem, really. Before we begin, please make sure that you are muted, and especially if you have a barking dog, chirping birds, television, or other commotion in the background. Be sure to mark your calendar for our next meeting in July. We're focusing our summer programs to what's happening in woods and wetlands. You may not know, but we have a lot of people who are doing a lot of really important works, and they have head leaders for the initiatives. So we're going to focus on those this summer. We're going to tell you what's going on and how you can get involved. In July, we are delighted to have our very own self-avowed energy nerd, Jay Fuderman, who is going to lead us through a room-by-room tour of our houses in his house and tell us how we can save energy, cut our carbon footprint, and even save a little money in the process. So that'll be on July 10th. You're going to want to sign up for that and do join us. If you register and then have to miss the meeting, by being registered, I will send you that YouTube link. So you can always join it in the future. Finally, we really welcome your questions. Our speakers are geared to answer your questions, but in order to prevent duplicate questions, we ask you to use the chat box, which is at the bottom of the screen. Type in your questions, and then our handy dandy helpers will sort them out and present the questions to our host, our guest speaker at the very end of his talk. And now let's get on to it. Enough of that. Ted Glasso, who will be our host tonight, is a native of Minnesota, and he grew up in and around inland lakes. He is now an award-winning nature and landscape photographer living on the shores of Lake Michigan. He has found his artistic niche and built his reputation focusing on imagery, showcasing the beauty of water. In the process, Ted has become passionate about conservation and protection of Lake Michigan in particular, and water and our natural world in general. Welcome, Ted Glasso, Ambassador for the Alliance for the Great Lakes. You have the control.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen here. And see. There we go. I hope that's all working right and you can see that.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much. This is a short talk on the Great Lakes in your community, and I am an ambassador, volunteer for the Alliance for the Great Lakes, and I've been doing that about 5 years or so. So a quick overview of what I want to cover is the importance of the Great Lakes, the issues impacting the Great Lakes and the work of the Alliance, and finally actions you can take starting today to make a difference in the Great Lakes. So, as mentioned, I'm a nature and landscape photographer for the last 15 years, and my work features Lake Michigan quite heavily. And I left my website there if you're interested in seeing some of those pictures. I've been a volunteer for the Alliance for at least 12 years. I have done beach cleanups and led beach cleanups. The Alliance started the Adopt a Beach program. And so that's a very big part of what they do. And I've been working on that. And then I've been an Alliance ambassador for the last 5 years or so. And the ambassadors generally help out the staff and go and do tabling events, man a table at some various different events, and hand out literature and answer questions and things like that. And then we also do talks like this whenever we can. So, the importance of the Great Lakes. I want to go over this. The Great Lakes hold the most surface fresh water in the world. They account for about, this slide says 18%. It goes 18 to 20% of the world's supply of fresh water, including 90% of North America's supply. 1 in 10 Americans get their water from the Great Lakes. 1 in 4 Canadians get their water from the Great Lakes. So fresh water is amazingly important to all of us, of course, and this is the largest surface freshwater system in the world, which is still kind of amazing to me, that it's right here in our backyard. So fresh water, I just want to go over this quickly. How precious is fresh water to all of us on this planet? I'm going to ask this rhetorically since we're saving our questions and answers to the end, but how much of the Earth's surface is covered by water? And you can silently guess yourselves, but the answer is 71%. So the Earth's surface is covered by a lot of water, and as you can all imagine, the oceans are very deep in places. So that's a tremendous amount of water that's available. So how is that 71% of the surface allocated? Saltwater oceans account for, amazingly, almost 97% of all the surface water. Then other saline water like brackish water is about 1%, and that leaves surface other fresh water at only 2.5% of all the water. So that is not a lot of fresh surface water. But how is that allocated? Glaciers and ice caps make up 68.7%. Groundwater is 30%, and that leaves surface other fresh water at 1.2% of all the surface water. And I know groundwater isn't surface water, but it counts in the water allocation. So now we're down to 1.2% of water. Ice and permafrost make up almost 70% of that fresh water. So that's not really something we can use, something that humans have access to. Although it's slowly melting, so we're getting some of it back. But available fresh water, lakes make up about 21% of that surface water, including the Great Lakes. Soil and moisture, about 4%, the atmosphere and all the rain and whatnot at 3%. And then these other things make up the rest, including living things, which include us, which is a scant 0.26% of the fresh water on the earth. So is there any water left for us? And how precious is that? Well, we'll do a quick review. All the water in the world is this much. All the fresh water in the world is that tiny sliver. All the available fresh water is yet even smaller. So now the question is, what percent of all the water in the world is fresh water that we could drink and use for all the myriad things that all of us use water for? And the answer is 0.01%. So 1/100% of all the water in the world is available fresh water. And so fresh water is amazingly precious and in scant supply, despite the fact that we can look out and see the Great Lakes right in our backyard in Lake Michigan and Lake Erie for everyone else and Lake Superior, which seems like an amazing amount of water, and yet it is hardly anything. It's literally a drop in the bucket worldwide. And just for fun, I made a little graphic that shows exactly what 1/100% looks like, which is that little red X in the middle. In addition, the Great Lakes have 3,500 species of plants, animals, and and it's important that we protect that because as biodiversity is becoming more and more important to us, and we're realizing how we have diluted that and how we constantly are diluting that, the Great Lakes has an abundance of species of plants and animals, including 170 species of fish. There are also over 180 invasive species which live in the Great Lakes. And invasive species, if you're not familiar, are animals, mostly animals, but other plants too, and microscopic organisms that have been transported into the lakes, mostly through ocean-going vessels, which come into the Great Lakes and then emptied their ballast tanks of water that they had picked up in their original location. And that water was full of all sorts of things. And we'll look into that in a little bit. So what are some of the issues impacting the Great Lakes and our supply of fresh water? Nutrient pollution. And this is generally from agricultural runoff. What happens is farmers lay lots of fertilizer on their fields. It rains, it gets irrigated, and that washes off and goes into the water system, goes downstreams, and ends up into the lakes. And it causes algae blooms that are dangerous and toxic. And Lake Erie is sort of more susceptible to this because it is the shallowest of the Great Lakes. And also it's pretty much surrounded by agricultural fields and that. So this is a satellite view, obviously, of Lake Erie and what the plumes can look like when it's very severe. And you can see it also goes all the way up into Lake St. Clair, which is not a Great Lake, but it probably should be. It's in the system of the Great Lakes. This is what that algae looks like if you're brave enough to put your hand in the water and lift it out. It's pretty disgusting. And as many of you know, Toledo had to shut down its water supply for 4 days because it got so toxic that the water was not potable anymore. And that is a very reoccurring problem, especially down in the south area there that you can see, Toledo and Sandusky. And they're working on it. They're trying to get farmers to lay down less fertilizer and to clean it up once they do, to try to contain it. Plastic pollution is another huge issue that the Alliance works towards. There was a Rochester Institute of Technology study that said that there would more than 22 million pounds of plastic pollution end up in the Great Lakes every year. And that's still a mind-boggling number to me, 22 million pounds of plastic. When I first read that, I thought, why isn't there plastic just floating on the surface, and covering the lake completely? But it doesn't. It floats around in there, and it never really goes away. Plastic breaks down, but it takes, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years for it to actually break up completely. And it breaks down into what are known as microplastics, which are just tiny pieces of plastic. And microplastics also include things like fleece. Your favorite fleece, every time you wash it, little bits of those hairs wash off, go into the sewer, go all the way through the water treatment, and they're so fine and so small they don't get taken out, and then that pours right back into the water supply. And so researchers have found plastic in just about everything in the world. It's in fish, it's in other animals, it's in us, it's in breast milk, it's everywhere. These tiny microscopic plastics are everywhere. And a little reminder here that that's drinking water for 40 million people from the Great Lakes, and the plastic is in all of that. I had mentioned the Alliance Adopt-A-Beach. 90% of the litter that's found during an Adopt-A-Beach cleanup is plastic. And it's amazing, but I've done many of them, and it is strange that you can pick up so much plastic, little tiny pieces of plastic. Styrofoam also is a problem, cigarette butts. It's amazing what you can find on a beach. Sorry about that. So there is a plastic-free Great Lakes pledge, and there is the URL. I would suggest just go to greatlakes.org, and you can find the plastic-free Great Lakes pledge there. And I would encourage you to take it. And invasive species, which is the thing I mentioned earlier, and they are dangerous intruders, to be sure. There are 180 plus. I think it was 188 the last time I heard an actual number. Here are some of the invasive species that are in the lakes and are causing problems in lots of different ways. I'll mention a book. It's called The Death and Life of the Great Lakes. And it's an amazing book that chronicles all the different things that the lakes have been through and that humans have tried to do to stop some of the invasive species, why the invasive species got into the lake in the first place, some of the things that have been done. And it's a hard book to read because it's very, it lays out the destruction of the Great Lakes in many ways. But the good news is when you're done, you have a much better appreciation for what they are and what they've been through and how important they are to us. So I was just going to highlight a few of these, the alewives, which I'm sure many of you who have lived in Chicago for a while remember, the die-off of the alewives. And this is actually at Montrose Harbor, this picture, I should say. Sea lamprey, which are one of the strangest, scariest looking fish, I think. and they are known to just clamp onto the side of fish and basically suck the life out of them until they're dead or severely compromised. Then they let go and they go find another fish. They were a major, major problem. They have gotten better because research has been done on how to kill them early on in their lives when they actually go up streams, tributaries to the lakes to spawn, and they've found ways to take care of them there so that they never do reach adulthood and go back into the lakes. Zebra mussels and quagga mussels, I'm sure you've seen those, and some of you may have felt them under your feet. There is something I've learned, and I don't know who came up with this. It might have been in the book, The Death and the Life of the Great Lakes, but if we could drain the lakes, in particular Lake Michigan, that the bottom would be completely covered in zebra and quagga mussels. Both of these came in on ocean-going vessels, got into the lake, and obviously found an environment that they could really get behind, and they proliferated amazingly. They are everywhere. It's interesting too that the round goby fish, which is also an invasive species, was discovered to have adapted to eat the quagga and zebra mussels. Normally that fish would not eat a shell fish like that, but they learned to do it to survive. And so they actually eat some of the mussels. And then the big one, the big head carp. And there are three versions of the carp, Asian carps, that are in they're very near the watershed, the Great Lakes watershed. As you probably know, they're just down the Illinois River, they're in the Mississippi, and they are getting dangerously close to getting to Lake Michigan. Particularly because that is where the Chicago River was reversed, and there is an actual waterway that the fish can simply swim through and get to the Great Lakes. That is being addressed, and I will mention that next. But these fish are voracious eaters, and the big fear is that if they get into the Great Lakes, and if they can create a sustained population, a self-sustaining population, that they'll basically eat everything else that's in the lake. So it could be a gigantic environmental disaster if they get into the lake. The little rays of hope are that maybe they won't be able to live in the cold water, and that they won't be able to survive and sustain a population in the colder waters, but then with global warming coming, maybe they could. So that's yet to be determined, but before that happens, there is a plan to stop them, and that is the Brandon Road Project. Brandon Road is down in Joliet, and I marked it on this map of the Chicago area. And then a closer look at it in particular is this Brandon Road Lock and Dam. This is where it's been determined that is the most centralized, efficient place to block the carp from getting into the Great Lakes watershed. And that is going to happen through this system. This is an overhead view of the actual lock, and there is a dam up in the upper left corner there, close to where it says to Lake Michigan. So the fish aren't going to be able to get up there and over a dam, but they can go through the locks. So this is a multi-step process that's been developed here. including an electric barrier, which is going to stun them and hopefully make them think twice about trying to swim up the lock. There's an air bubble curtain, which is just air that is pumped into a tube at the bottom that rises up. And they have determined that the fish don't particularly like to swim through the bubbles. There's also an acoustic fish deterrent where they're going to use sound to do that, and then an engineered channel which is designed to try to dissuade them from coming up there. Then they'll do things like flushing the locks completely in order to get rid of anything that might have gone up that far and then lost. The other thing that they're trying to do is move the boat launches upstream so that fishermen don't inadvertently bring fish back or forth. And I'm sure you've heard of those. The quagga mussels and the zebra mussels have been a problem in that way too, is that they get onto fishing boats in the lakes, then the boats are taken out and taken to an inland lake somewhere else and put in, and the quagga mussels have proliferated all over the Midwest by that. So that is the Brandon Road project that hopefully is going to stop the fish. And there's the direction of the carp migration and then the direction of the current. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the Alliance's work and what they do and what their priorities are. Three major areas that they work on are advocacy and leadership, education and action, and then research and analysis. So the idea is to try to cover as much area as possible and to get people involved in different ways and to get the political system involved in government and policy in order to help save the Great Lakes. And I say save, which sounds a little dramatic, but it really is something that needs to be done. Some examples you can, if you're interested, go to the Alliance website, which is greatlakes.org, and then there you can find an impact in history, which goes over some of the things they've done. The advocacy and leadership, they're working on reducing plastic pollution, as mentioned, fighting harmful algae blooms, preventing water diversions, and I'm sure some of you have heard of those, particularly the Fox factory up in Waukegan. No, it wasn't Waukegan. It was in Wisconsin. They wanted to divert lots of water to make LED screens. Interestingly enough, Chicago is the only city that does not have to abide by a program where if a municipality takes water out of the Great Lakes water basin, they have to return the same amount of water after it's been treated, etc. Chicago, because of the way they've changed the flow of the river, it's pretty much impossible to return the water that Chicago uses. So Chicago actually gets to take out lots of water from Lake Michigan and not return it. But generally speaking, around the lakes, you have to return as much water as you take out. So education and action, part of that is the Adopt a Beach. There's a Great Lakes voter toolkit, which is very helpful when election time comes around. The Alliance is a nonpartisan organization, and so the voter toolkit is more about what is important for the Alliance and for people who are interested in protecting the lakes and giving you information about that. And then the Adopt a Beach, of course, and then research and analysis. They do a lot of great work assessing water affordability, stopping the invasive carp, and convening peer exchanges for local officials. And they create a data book that you can see there, which is also helpful for lots of people who are doing research on the Great Lakes and need comprehensive and good research. 4 areas of focus: environmental justice and climate change are woven throughout the Alliance. Clean, affordable drinking water, they're working on that, including issues like the Flint, Michigan water fiasco. Invasive species, non-point source pollution, specifically that agricultural runoff, and then plastic pollution, which is a huge problem worldwide and in the lakes. The 2022 Great Lakes federal policy priorities. They want to fund water infrastructure to get rid of lead supply pipes in our drinking waters. There's a Great Lakes Restoration Fund, which has always been bipartisan, enjoyed bipartisan support at $400 million. And then fully fund the invasive carp protections, because at this point, the state of Illinois and to some degree the city of Chicago are responsible for trying to stop that and implement the Brandon Road project. And the idea is that because this is a major issue that could affect all the people around the Great Lakes and the Great Lakes themselves, that the federal government should really fund that, because it is it's a national concern to make sure that those fish stay out of the Great Lakes. Fund water infrastructure and water quality. I can let you read these things, but it's interesting that the recent Jobs Act of 2021 included $50 billion over 5 years to fix outdated drinking and wastewater infrastructure. But there's the estimated cost over 20 years is $188 billion. So it's a tremendous amount of money. But water is very important, and protecting that water is very important. And, let you look at some of these. There are lots of things the Alliance does, amazing stuff. And the Great Lakes Initiative was established 15 years ago. That's an amazing fund that it helps support all sorts of projects all around the lake, including restoring wetlands and other important things. So the Alliance is calling on Congress to allocate the $400 million. Increase funding for cleaning up toxic hotspots, which unfortunately are all around, including in Gary and areas on the south end of Lake Michigan and around the lakes everywhere. Invasive carps, obviously we want to get rid of that. They're within 50 miles of Chicago and Lake Michigan. So we're going to work on that as much as possible, because the Army Corps originally was talking about a 20-year project to stop the carp, and I'm afraid that's maybe way too late with what's in place now to try to stop them. Again, wanting to get the federal government to pay for 100% of the funding for the Brandon Road project. And finally, the Alliance for the Great Lakes. As I mentioned, this is a nonpartisan, nonprofit. It works across all the regions in 8 states to protect the fresh, clean, and natural waters of the Great Lakes. There is a Canadian counterpart that also works through the provinces to do the same thing. One thing that's been very important for the Alliance is the idea of environmental justice. And that's the principle that all people are entitled to equal environmental protection, regardless of race, color, or national origin. It's the right to live and work and play in a clean environment. Unfortunately, things are not always equal, if ever equal. And some people live their lives with plenty of fresh water and a clean environment, and other people end up living and working in areas that are polluted and not helped at all. And that is something that the Alliance is has worked very hard for, and to try to change that. And this is a great statement by the Alliance that social, racial, and economic justice are inseparable from environmental justice. We can have a beautiful, clean Great Lakes when systemic racism is allowed to permeate our society. Some things you can do to take action. You can tell Congress, all of our senators and representatives, that we want clean, safe water, and it's a basic human need, and that the Great Lakes are incredibly important as far as this goes. This is available at greatlakes.org. Take action /take action. You can see there. Now, some of the things you can do today: sign the plastic-free Great Lakes Pledge, and I will make all of these URLs available to be disseminated afterwards. Hopefully, we can get those emailed out to everybody. You can contact your lawmakers, as mentioned before. You can participate in an Adopt a Beach cleanup. There are cleanups going on all the time, all around the Great Lakes. If you go to adopt.greatlakes.org, you can find and search for a beach near you, or a beach where you're going on vacation, or anywhere else. The spring kickoff this year was April 22nd through the 24th. Beach cleanups are fun and easy to do. You go around, you pick up all the trash, and you tally it on special forms that are provided, and then all of that information is sent back to the Alliance so that they can tabulate it and then use it in part of their research to determine what are the pollution problems that are found. And obviously, as mentioned before, plastics are the biggest problem with the cleanups. You can sign up at adopt.greatlakes.org to look for new ones coming. If you're interested in becoming an ambassador or a volunteer, you can email Olivia at the Alliance. She's the volunteer coordinator. And if you're interested in becoming an ambassador, it's a fun thing, and especially if you're passionate about the Great Lakes, you can sign up for that and get some training and other information, and then go out and be an ambassador for the Great Lakes. If you're interested, also just again, go to their website and you can subscribe and get email updates and information. Connect with them on social media. And again, I'll make sure that all this gets out there to use one way or the other. You can also go to greatlakes.org, take action. Thank you very much. And I will just mention again that I do photographs of Lake Michigan. So I think that's it, and we may be ready for some questions.
Well, thank you. Thomas and Rosemary, would you please take over?
Okay, thank you. Tom, are you still there? You want to start with one of your questions before Panera shuts you down? Oh, I don't know if he's there. Okay, well, Tom wanted to know, we know that the water level of Lake Michigan rises and falls, and a couple of years ago it was quite high. And he says, and now I believe it is lower. What is the connection, if any, between this fluctuation and the rate of replacing water that has been pumped out for our use? Shouldn't it just keep getting lower and lower?
You'd think so. Yeah, it's a complicated process, but the the surface water, often a lot of the water that is sorry about that, is taken out is groundwater, but also the surface water, that the height of the lakes has much more to do with the environment and the climate, because the most water that gets put into the lakes or comes into the lakes is in the spring during the snow and the winter melt off. And then it evaporates a lot during the summer. So it goes down a little bit, and then fall comes. And the way it should work, and it used to work, is the lake would be frozen. All the lakes would be frozen over to some degree, never 100%, but that stops evaporation. And so then it levels off, the water levels. Then as the ice melts, the water comes back up. So yeah, water is an amazing thing, that it finds its own level, as we all know. And I think that would probably be the clearest indication of why, even if you pump water out, it'll get replaced.
Very
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, Tom's there. You want to ask one of the other
Yes,
questions?
I
Tom?
apologize for being muted there. I had forgotten
That's all right.
that I had muted myself. Thank you for a wonderful talk. This was excellent. Linda wants to know, are areas like the Southwest that are water poor still trying to design pipes to move Great Lakes water to the southwestern parts of the country?
Um, you know, people believe a lot of things, as we all know recently. They can be talked into a lot of things. And there are people who think that that could be a possibility, but the physics of it don't really lend itself. To try to get water from, for example, Chicago, to build a pipeline that would go over or under the mountains between here and the Southwest, in the topography, it doesn't make much sense. And it would take an amazing amount of energy just to pump that amount of water. And then to get enough water to the Southwest, you'd have to have a gigantic pipeline or many pipelines. At one point, they talked about taking super tankers and bringing them to the Great Lakes and filling them full of water, and then sailing them all the way back over, to LA or somewhere. And that was the same thing. I mean, it would cost far more in the fuel to actually try to transport that water. So, I mean, unless something majorly changes, I don't think that's even viable in any way to get water from here to the Southwest. Yeah, I think they're going to have to try to figure that out themselves.
Very good. Thank you.
Jay wants to know, are there any specific asks that the Alliance has for Lake County that maybe we can ask our county government to take action on?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I would say, agricultural runoff is a problem even in this area. What's interesting for Lake County and even, most of Chicagoland, the Great Lakes watershed is just such a fine, small area right along the lake that, once you get, I think it's 25 miles maybe inland, you're in a different, you've crossed a continental divide and all the water is going to the Mississippi.
Ted, it's a lot less than that. It's only about 5 miles.
There you go. So yeah, it's hard to come up with something that will affect the Lake Michigan. much more than what communities right on the shores can do. Yeah.
Tom wanted to know,
Yeah.
can
Go
you,
ahead.
can you tell us what's in the Great Lakes Pledge? How many people have signed on?
That's an excellent question. I don't know an exact number. And the pledge is to reduce your single-use plastic use as much as possible. When I do, the beach cleanups, there are so many straws and things like that. It's amazing how many straws we use and how many plastic cups and whatever. So that's the biggest thing, is to try to go through your household and your lifestyle and find ways to not use plastic.
Boy,
and try to-
that's so important. Sharon
Yeah.
Starr, are you on the program tonight? Are you there, Sharon?
I was going to mention.
Yes, I'm here.
Sharon,
Hi.
if you could just add a couple of sentences for Ted's enlightenment on what we are doing in terms of plastics. Just a sentence or two would be great.
Okay, well, we have a plastics campaign that's intended to reduce the demand for and use and disposal of single-use plastics. And it's very localized and very focused. Just as our starting point, there's a lot more we could do and hope to do in the future. But we're starting with a focus on restaurants, which started actually during the pandemic when there was a lot of carry-out business, more than sit-down business. And that's where a good share of the single-use plastics are used. To work with restaurants to get them to at least stop giving out plastic cutlery and straws unrequested by customers. Have the customers opt in other words, and not make it a default. We hope they'll go farther than that, but that's a starting point, and it's a win-win. The other thing we're doing is working on collecting data and key messages and other things to put together. We're putting together a big slide bank to be able to create and customize presentations that we can deliver to groups, really anything from schools, libraries, community groups, civic groups, churches, any place where people gather. And also in the process, work with organizations that are like restaurants, serving food, and hopefully, get some reduction in the single-use plastic there. But most importantly, I think to educate consumers about why this is a problem, why it's important to reduce their use of single-use plastic, and how to do it. Because it may seem like a daunting task, but in most cases, it's very easy. It's a matter of changing habits, changing sources of purchase, and it's very doable.
And saving money.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's amazing that that a restaurant wouldn't voluntarily really want to not throw out all that cutlery and everything else that they throw in there.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was excellent.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Linda had a question early on about the rules about taking water and replacing it. Are those also in place in Canada?
Yes. Yeah, they have a very similar thing. It's interesting that, Canada, its population centers are much more concentrated and smaller than the US's. If you look at Lake Superior, for example, much of that northern shoreline is sparsely populated relative to what we do in the U.S. Even between Chicago and Milwaukee is amazingly dense, and there are probably more people just in Milwaukee or Racine than there are all along that shore. So that's to say they have a different thing, different problems to look at. But yes, definitely municipalities have to replace the water they take.
Ted, does the Alliance endorse candidates for public office?
No.
So you're a 501c3 or?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They don't make any endorsements or anything else.
And they don't have a political arm that can legislate on their behalf or lobby on their behalf?
No, they lobby for policy.
Mhm.
They will lobby lawmakers and
Uh-huh.
try to do it that way, but it's not political at all.
Okay, and do they contribute to anyone's election campaign?
No.
Okay.
Ted, you are aware, no doubt, about the Superfund site in Waukegan that the federal government has been cleaning up now for many years. Does the Alliance for the Great Lakes spend any time doing research on the effects of that pollution from that site?
Yes, yeah, they will. They do all sorts of research, and that obviously is a major, issue and a problem that's lasted forever. And I think hopefully they're getting closer to finishing that. I have a good friend who works for the EPA who's been involved in that,
Very good.
monitoring that cleanup. But yes, they do.
And how about the coal ash ponds now at the coal plant?
Yeah. I would say that if they are near the lakes or the watershed in general, then they're obviously a major issue. I know that at least in Illinois, a lot of those are on river systems.
No,
And
in
near
Waukegan,
rivers.
they're in the watershed of the Great Lakes.
Yeah,
They're right
then
next to it.
yes, definitely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Tom, there's another one in the box there. from-
Yeah, the question I had was from Karen Hine. She mentions that Foxconn was the company in
Yes.
Mount Pleasant. My question, building on Karen's comment, what is the status of Foxconn now? I've heard that it is not coming anywhere remotely close to creating the jobs and the economic activity that it promised.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. That's what I've heard too, is that I don't know how that works exactly, other than I'm sure they have a very good PR program.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they got a lot of politicians thinking that this was going to be a great thing. And it turns out it's not.
It's a disaster, yeah.
Yeah.
Karen goes on about the chemical runoff from companies in Indiana.
Yeah.
Were these companies assessed fines? There were a couple of serious chemical releases on the Indiana side. What are the
Yes.
consequences to the company?
Yes, I know about those too. Yes, I'm sure they will be if they haven't been. It's a frustrating thing to me because there's so many lawyers involved and so many laws, and sadly so many excuses about why that could happen. And I'm still baffled by why they can discharge any amount of mercury or lead into the water. And for whatever reason, there are these thresholds. Well, if it's only 20 gallons or something, it's okay. So yes, I think and it's also documentation because of all the litigation. You have to prove that they did it and when they did it and how much it was. And yeah.
All right, that's all I have.
Yeah,
me.
excellent presentation. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Ted.
Thank
I
you.
want to make a joke about the Ted Glasso hour, but I won't. I will refrain from any such thing because
Okay.
it's too easy a joke.
Yeah. I'm actually glad that show came out because people can mispronounce my last name, and
Uh-huh.
ever since that came out, people have a much easier way of remembering how to say glosso, So
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Linda,
Thank
back
you.
over to you to close things out.
I do have one last question, if I may. Do you know
Sure.
anything about the condition of the fishing in the Great Lakes? I know at one time they said the walleye fishing in Lake Erie was done. I'm pretty old, so that could have been a long time ago. But
Yeah.
have you got any idea of the condition in the Great Lakes for sports fishing and
Yeah.
industrial fishing?
Yeah, that story is just sad. But I know that Lake Erie has the most. There was a kind of a joke I heard, but it wasn't exactly. But it's something like Lake Superior has 80% of the water and only 20% of the fish, and Lake Erie has 80% of the fish and only 20% of the water. Yeah, it's amazing that that's like the walleye capital of the world. I know that the fishing industry is hurting. I mean, definitely commercial fishing is really almost done, I think. And then sports fishing, people. Sadly, there are some people who like to fish for the carp, the Asian carp, because they fight a lot, which is bizarre. I don't know. For me, it's a little strange, but and that's why they like the salmon too. And as many of you probably know, the salmon are stocked in the Great Lakes. They're not native. They don't belong there, but they are stocked for the sports fishermen. But the population of salmon has not maintained itself. They literally have to stock it every single year to try to keep them available, even the small amount that are there and can be used for sports fishing. I mean, who are
Ted, I have one more question. If I
Sure.
can squeeze one in.
here?
For a long time, we were discouraged, people in general were discouraged from eating fish from Lake Michigan because of mercury and other toxins.
Mhm.
Is that still the case? And often on restaurant menus, I'll see Lake Superior whitefish.
Mhm.
Is that safe to eat? And is it?
Yeah, I would say Lake Superior is a much safer fish to eat
Than Lake Michigan, okay.
than Lake Michigan. Yeah, I still hear that too. It's amazing people fish in the harbors even.
Yeah.
And catch fish and eat them. But the commercial fishing in Lake Michigan has taken a huge hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, so far has avoided certain environmental and other
Yeah.
issues because it's bigger and deeper and colder.
Right. Well, thank you again. Over and
you.
out to Linda there. Oh, hold on. We have another question from Donna.
Yep, there we go. Take it away. Hi, Donna.
What about Lake Erie perch and walleye? Should one eat it?
As far as I know, yes. I think the caveat is don't eat it more than once a week.
Okay.
It's it's one of those things where there's enough concentration of different things in those fish that if you ate it every day or ate it very regularly, you'd have a much higher chance of actually accumulating something.
Yeah. Hey, can I bring you back to
Thank you.
a question from Karen Hine? I don't think we really did it justice. There are two other questions she asked. Are the companies that pollute from Indiana in particular, she's asking about, are they assessed fines? And what are the consequences for the companies?
I think the answer is yes, they are assessed fines, provided there's enough evidence and documentation and they make it through enough court cases. They would be, assessed fines. I'm probably a little bit cynical, but I would say that the fines aren't nearly enough to persuade them to try to avoid doing it.
Yeah.
I think it seems like the legal fees and the fines are just built into the cost of doing business.
Sure. And Doug Auer, our chairman, points out that fish boils in Door County, Wisconsin are very popular, and they use whitefish there. Even though they're right next to Green Bay and Lake Michigan, they use Lake Superior whitefish for these fish boils.
Yeah.
I do know something about that, having just experienced one. Apparently, they go off the end. Door County is at the end, and they go off into the deeper waters at the end. I understand Green Bay is really pretty bad. And as far as eating, something that should be mentioned is pregnant women are not supposed to eat Great Lakes fish.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The rest of us, we're probably okay occasionally. But yeah, so we thank you for all your information. We know you have much more to tell us, but we do have to cut it off because Panera is going to close and our dear Thomas is going to be kicked out. But we do thank you. And if you will send me the email addresses you mentioned, and also we'll put that Great Lakes, the title of that book and author, I know it came up. I will include that when I send the thank you. I will send you a thank you for coming, all who are registered, and I will send you that information. I'll put it in that same email. So that really concludes our program. It's been another in a series of popular family-oriented events that explore our world around us. We here at Woods and Wetlands are primarily Lake County, Illinois, a little bit of northern Cook County and McHenry County, but I urge you all, I don't know if this is legal, I may not supposed to do this, but log on to Sierra Club and put your email on, and if you give them your $15, you can join and they'll put you in the right group. We don't take any money and we don't charge any money or get any money for these programs. But let me just give you a sneak peek. In July and August, we're going to take a break from inviting speakers and instead focus on what we're doing here in Woods and Wetlands. We've got a lot of people doing a lot of really important work, projects, volunteer, grassroots initiatives on everything you could imagine, from butterflies to, let me say, solar power. Does that ring a bell, Jay?
Yeah.
Jay Fuderman will be our guest speaker next month, and he's going to help us fight climate change one room at a time. He's going to go through his house and tell us, I should actually let him tell you this, but he'll tell you next month what you can do to cut those carbons out of your emissions and save a little money. Really important. I'm very excited for that one. Maybe he'll tell us a little bit about solar power and solar cars too, will you, Jay?
That'll be part of it for sure.
In August, we're not completely set, but we are going to have Jerry Songer tell us about railway safety. It's a real issue, and we do want to get that story out. That'll be Jay will be July 10th, and August is it's August 14th, the second Sunday. So thank you for coming. We're delighted to meet with you. All of us are on the same page, I think, and it's wonderful to have you in attendance. And I hope that you are still catching a few of those sun rays out there. And we look forward to seeing you. I always think I'm so clever when I say, we'll see you. Good night. And thank you again, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.